least that's the plan. And you may ask us why you're presenting this topic. It's not so exciting. Huh? We have been recently reorganizing our office and defining a little more what is the responsibility of our Leadership Misconduct Office. And therefore, we felt it may be interesting for devotees all over the world to see what we are doing. You heard this morning from Champakalata that the international office is only taking care of sexual abuse. We will present you that we added all the different kinds of abuse which can happen from a leadership side, you know. And you see here, it's about trust, you know. If somebody joins a movement, it's first of all trust in people, trust in leaders, trust in preachers, trust in contacts. And then second one, of course, then trust in scriptures, trust in the philosophy. So it's important that actually we can keep this trust. So that's the main topic of the Leadership Misconduct Office. You may have heard this morning that internationally, it's called now the Conduct Office. We in North America decided against that because that our main topic is not that we are looking for the positive aspects. Unfortunately, we are dealing with the other aspects, and therefore it's the misconduct which is our focus. So Anuttama Prabhu, please come to the front. And I was doing a little introduction so far and hand it over to you. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Anybody in the session we just left with me? I do have positive thoughts sometimes. I just want to clarify that. The other one was about what can go wrong too. Okay, so this is a session about the North American Leadership Misconduct Office, which was introduced. And we could understand that there's an international office, but we knew the procedures were a little, hadn't been completely unpacked, and we felt that we really wanted to kind of be proactive in doing that. So we created a committee, worked on it for 6 months or so. So these are some of the key elements. The screen's small, so I'm going to step back over here, okay? Why the North American Leadership Misconduct Office exists. To ensure ethical leadership in North America. This is from our official document. To prevent and respond to leadership misconduct. Did you define that? Did you define leadership misconduct? Okay. Yeah, we talk about sexual, financial, emotional. Protects devotees to maintain spiritual integrity. Promotes safe, secure, and sacred environment. Ensures ethical management of community funds. Okay, next one. So what is leadership misconduct? Here it breaks it down. Types of leadership misconduct. Sexual abuse, ranging from harassment to assault. Physical abuse and violence against followers. Emotional abuse, or often referred to as pastoral abuse. Financial abuse. So they involve misuse of institutional power. It can occur between leader-follower relationships and can take place inside or outside ISKCON. If it's an ISKCON authority, if they do something inappropriate off the property, it still is something that we need to take into consideration. Okay, next one. So here's some kind of more detailed definitions, again from our document. Harassment includes staring in a suggestive manner, unwelcome flirting, intentionally standing uncomfortably close to another person. You know, we got reports of people like they're in the Bajari room, but, you know, somebody repeatedly walks by too close to someone of the opposite gender, usually a man, rubbing against a woman, and it's like extremely uncomfortable. It's harassment. Obscene gestures, sexual jokes, indecent exposure, jeering or whistling, sexualized verbal comments, pictures or videos, touching or rubbing one's private parts in the presence of another person, use of sexually suggestive or explicit materials, including pornography, making sexual comments about one's own or another person's body. That all comes under harassment, so you can see some of it's pretty serious. Assault, unwelcome touching, stalking, intercourse, rape. Involves the use of words and actions to control. This is emotional abuse. The use of words and actions to control, manipulate, intimidate another person. Includes manipulation, isolation, and demeaning and threatening behaviors. Excessive controlling and monitoring of a person's behavior. Threatening a person's safety or that of their loved ones. Isolating the person from friends and family. demeaning, shaming, or humiliating the person, excessively criticizing, ridiculing, or unreasonably limiting a person's choices, thwarting a person's professional or spiritual beliefs, goals, or services, instilling feelings of self-doubt and or worthlessness, and making a person question their competence or basic perceptual experiences. Let's pause there for a second. We are very ripe for this. We are ripe for this. Because where do you draw on the line? To what extent is my spiritual authority excessively controlling? Or to what extent are they guiding me out of good intention and thoughtful decision making? To what extent, we all know we are a culture that looks disparagingly on some aspects of the greater society at large. So to what extent is that philosophically educating us as to the dangers of, the bar scene? Or to what extent are we isolating people from friends and family? And these things can be excessive and they can be abusive. And we've seen that within our society. We still see that sometimes. To what extent, as a spiritual authority, a counselor, a guru, a temple president, am I correcting errant behavior? To what extent maybe it crosses a line, it becomes demeaning, shaming, or humiliating the other person? So it's a fine line there that we're trying to understand better how to respond to. And we saw, just mention this, we saw in North America, some of you may have seen it within the last couple of years, there was a situation, it happened to be a woman temple president, surprisingly, who was accused of a lot of this emotional abuse. We had to take some steps. We had to do investigation and determine we also felt she was abusing her power. And we kind of had it under control. And boom, pops up on page 1 of the lifestyle section of the New York Times, or maybe it was the front page. Abuse within the Krishna movement because of all these kind of things. Just in a sense, just Krishna telling us, you're on the right path, clean it up. Fix this before there's more situations like this.
Why did we show you all these details? Because it's complex, it's not as easy. And you will see that we have 2 topics. First of all, when we start actual report, we say the leaders have actually a mandatory responsibility to report misconduct. So therefore it's important that we know the details, what can happen, how actually misconduct is actually showing up. And here we speak about reporting and case initiation, So you see, we say that anyone of knowledge or with suspicion can actually report. That means practically everybody, because everybody can have a suspicion. If they feel that a leader is actually mistreating somebody, is abusing somebody in different ways, financial, what we see, sexual, whatever it is, that's possible. Second one, as I said before, the leaders, they are mandatory reporters to the office. So they have to know and be trained what is actually misconduct. And last but not least, of course, witnesses can report it, or if the witness doesn't want to come forward and shares it with a friend or whatever. So this is a third party actually reporter. So they can actually report, What happens then if there is a report? That we don't actually deal on the office level with all the details. As an example, a topic between a department head and his devotee staff. We ask first that the local leadership is dealing with the reports. We say the temple president or the zonal supervisor or the GBC. However, if this is not happening within 15 days, they can directly move forward and report it to the office itself, And also, if they're unhappy about how it was dealt locally, they can report it to the office. But we just don't want that the office is overwhelmed with all nitty-gritty small stuff and is unable to deal with the real important cases. And we have an electronic form, so everybody can access the form and just fill it in. We have a special form for actually the reporters, but a special form for the witnesses too, okay? What happens if a report comes to the office? The director has to evaluate within 7 days if the case is accepted. First question is, was it the leader? Was actually he preaching? Was he a temple president, the department head? Is he doing kirtan? What was his position? So it's only if he's a leader, if it's a normal devotee who has not a leadership position, then it's not part of the Leadership Misconduct Office. That may go somewhere else. Second one is, okay, how is the case? Was it dealt before? Was it properly dealt with on the local level? Do we have to accept it on the office level? Or yes, it's important. And how is the impact of this case? Will it impact, and is it an important topic for the safety of all the devotees in this community? And last but not least, the director has to decide, is it so serious that the leader has an EC, they're normally doing the day-to-day business, day-to-day service, within the limitations, the definition of the local RGB. But we have a liaison committee for child protection, in this case for leadership misconduct. They are communicating between the EC or the RGB and the director of child protection or the director of misconduct office here, because there are many details, and of course not everybody has the time to go into all the details, so we have this four head liaison committee, Anuttama Prabhu and myself, we are part of the liaison committee, therefore we are presenting together. And you see here the director names an investigator. If there are not too many cases, the director handles the support and the supervision himself. If you have many cases, we would have a case manager in addition, and the case manager would then take up a number of cases. And the investigator and finally also the adjudication panel members, they have access to consultants. As an example, if somebody has taken money in one way or another from the temple, we may need a forensic accountant to look into the accounting, so that actually somebody from the profession can find out what was happening with the funds and so on. And you see lawyers, physicians, so there can be different topics. Thank you.
Okay, continuing on with the process. So a little bit of information more about how that works. There's a panel structure set up in order to look at these. 3 trained ISKCON members review cases with complete objectivity and confidentiality. Obviously, that's something you strive for, complete confidentiality and objectivity. It's an evidence, what is our evidence standard, preponderance of evidence. There's different legal standards for how to determine responsibility or guilt. So we use the preponderance of evidence. And this is an interesting balance, because sometimes in some of the other adjudicatory processes in ISKCON, the question is, does it have to be unanimous decision or majority decision? Does it have to be beyond reasonable doubt, these different kind of legal things? So this is like, in one sense, the lowest standard of evidence is required, but the highest standard of unanimous decision is required. So it was said that was a good balance, that you need all of the panelists to agree, but agreeing to this standard of preponderance of evidence. Okay, next one. Okay, just as an example, leadership access restrictions. Some of the types of disciplinary actions can be taken. Temporary or permanent ban from leadership roles. These were going on before, but we're making it into a system. You know, it wasn't that these things have just showed up last week. They've been happening for decades. And part of what happens is you convene an ad hoc committee, whoever happens to be in charge that year, or the GBC in that area. It gets dumped on their plate with no sense of history. What do we do in similar situations in the past? What's strong, what's weak, what are the different benefits or disadvantages of different decisions? So there's a range given: temporary or permanent ban from leadership, restrictions from ISKCON centers, possible suspension from specific activities and services. Personal development requirements can be there, mandatory education and counseling. Behavior modification therapy, when we're talking really some serious problems. Probably very often requiring an apology to the complainant, and then sometimes monetary penalties for victim support fund, or if they've taken money, repayment of the money that's gone. Okay, next one. And there's an appeals process. So both the complainant, we use these terms, the complainant and the respondent, rather than saying the victim and the abuser. Those are very loaded terms. Instead of that, it's the complainant and the respondent. They both have the right, if there's when a decision comes down, to appeal it. These are the reasons. If the appeal is based on factual errors in the findings, if there's procedural errors, if there's new evidence, significant evidence that wasn't available during the initial investigation, maybe a witness comes forward they couldn't find, they went on pilgrimage to Africa for 6 months and showed up. Okay, new evidence. Review is conducted for the appeal by a 3-member panel, okay? That's good. And the director gives oversight throughout the process. Next slide. Just where do we distribute the decisions? That's always a big question. Who gets the decisions? Who can see them? So the complainant and the respondent obviously both get it. The GBC representative from that area, the zonal supervisor, and the temple president, those are the immediate authorities. And then on a need-to-know basis, additional devotees. This was a big question which we spent some time discussing and researching. How far, do you put their name up on ISKCON News or Dandavats? That wouldn't necessarily be helpful or appropriate. So on a need-to-know basis, there is, as we heard this morning, a Leadership Conduct Office International. They would obviously be informed, and any relevant authorities necessary to enforce the decision. So if somebody visits a whole bunch of temples we know on a regular basis, then we would make sure that they're all informed of the decision.
So here we're listing what we have defined, what actually the local center should do. So it's not just the office itself has a lot of responsibility. We are actually requesting, you see here, the local center preventive measures to provide ethic education. So we named this morning Yogeshwar's booklet on ethics, which he assembled from Srila Prabhupada's quotes, so that there is some education on topics. What are we expecting from a leader? How should the leader behave? What values should he actually follow, and so on, okay? We are asking, of course, for leaders that the background check is done and the clearance is actually given based on a screening. I don't know in your countries, but in US we have companies who are specialized in that. They're asking maybe $50, $70 to do that and tell you wherever somebody was staying, whatever he had a contact with the sheriff and maybe a court case and so on, it's all coming up, okay? And also to make the Alamo information resources available as much as needed and as much as possible. We heard this morning, or we received when we came the first day from Champakalata on the Justice Ministry, this little booklet. So the Alamo has a similar booklet, so this is distributed to the temples so that the devotees have access to it and can actually understand when are they actually needed or when they can actually make a complaint, And of course we have a North American RGB website where this document will be actually accessible electronically, where the devotees can read completely the process and the different kind of abuse, And then on the other side, if a case happens, what is the responsibility of the local center, First of all, support the complainant, maybe before, of course, a decision is taken, and ensure their well-being, depending on whatever abuse happened, but, take a devotee care part, take care of them so that they don't lose trust in Krishna consciousness, in ISKCON, in the leadership, And of course, if needed, always ask the complainant to report it to the law, because in different states, we are dealing with Canada and US in addition, different topics have to be reported to the outside law, and we are encouraging whenever it's needed or possible, we should actually do that so that
depending on the severity of the case.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Thank you for that, yeah. But depending, of course, on the severity of case, it's not that every little thing will go there, okay? And last but not least, what is important that actually we make sure that all the leaders in this in North America in the zone actually are ensuring compliance, you know. We had a case some years ago that one fundraiser was actually stealing money from a temple, okay? So the Misconduct Office was not dealing yet with financial abuse. So the temple dealt it locally with it itself. But then the fundraiser was moved to another temple. And the other temple was informed about the topic, but they never wanted to let him go after some experience they had themselves, you know. But nowadays, actually in such a case, the Misconduct Office would directly make a ban for the devotees in the same service, so that the other temple would have to follow. That's our little presentation here. So what is different from the international office? First of all, we are covering the 4 kinds of abuse that we have seen: sexual, physical, emotional, and financial. Second one, we try to streamline a little bit the process overall, that it's time-based. You have seen 7 days the director has time, and locally within 15 days they have to deal with the case, so that we don't get a backlog for years about different cases. Third one, we defined that the local leaders and the local centers, they have responsibility, preventive responsibilities and responsibility when we have a case. Okay, so that's our presentation so far. Any questions, comments? This was just a backup. If somebody would have questioned what is all the roles of the director, you can see here it's quite a vast responsibility to deal with, oversee a case, you know, have a non-disclosure agreement, provide initial care for a complainant, and then of course inform specifically the responsible leaders for this devotee that there is a case, an open case open, you know. So it's important that there is, as Anuttama Prabhu said, not actually publication on ISKCON News or Dandavats, but the leaders are informed, so they know there is a problem here, don't move him to another place, don't give him more responsibility, she or he, whatever it is, you know. Yeah? And then, of course, it's important, somebody for sure, or hopefully has only one case, they don't know how the process goes, they have to be informed. Okay, what are the steps, what are your rights, what can you do? By the way, the adjudication panel, we heard from Anuttama, there are 3 members. They will be publicly announced to this complainant respondent. As an example, they can object and say, I'm sorry, but there may be some question of conflict of interest. So therefore, I don't accept number 2 of the education panel. So please look for somebody else. So the director then, of course, would check if that's a reasonable request and look for that. And it continues like this, you know, look for an investigator, support the investigation or the education, and so on. And then finally inform the leaders, the complainant and respondent about the decision. And last but not least, have a sort of database, you know. We're thinking in US that we would have a database combined from Child Protection and Misconduct Office, like traffic lights, green, yellow, actually red. Huh? So the names will not be seen, but I can type in a name and see, okay, it's green means there is no case in the CPO side or in the leadership misconduct side. If there is yellow means, okay, there is an open case currently happening. Because the leaders normally, they have an urgent need to get the information back, you know. Can I engage this devotee? Is this cleared from the past? Is anything actually popping up? So that's our plan. We did not yet work on the execution, but we would like to make it as easy as possible for the leaders.
Any questions? Easy ones, you direct to me. Anything difficult? Jaya Krishna's here. I think he was first. We'll go 1, 2, 3. Is that okay? So I have the mic, so this has to be an easy question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. No, I'm just curious to know, in case of a decision is made about removal of a temple president or whatsoever, And if he does a counter lawsuit against the temple, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and if he wins because he don't know the law, and if there could be an error in discharging the duties, or potentially he could be right in some situation.
You must be based in North America.
Yeah, I am in California.
Yeah, yeah. The land of lawsuits. Well, those are reasons why we have to make sure the system is followed very carefully, including confidentiality, including, we don't mention here, but we definitely go on this presumption of innocence and still, quote, proven guilty. We learned this in the CPO years ago, you don't use terms like guilty and innocent and judges and, it's review panels found responsible. It's very much an ecclesiastical decision. And we do have to be careful because, people can threaten lawsuits. They do it all the time. And temples should have local legal advisors. Our legal advisor looked at this, so we have a sense that, we're operating under reasonable terms, and we'd have to make sure we follow the system.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Thank you for this initiative. And I have two questions. One question is with respect to thresholds. It's understood that a person who's committed abuse should not hold positions of leaderships. But in one section, it was also mentioned that their participation, presence in temples should be restricted. So how do you come up with the threshold in these 4 different categories of abuses to determine, as you use the word, severity? So have you prepared that, or is that work in progress?
I think it's probably something, we'll have to consult with the International Office on that. And this has been functioning to some extent or the other with the sexual misconduct for some time. So a big part of that is to try to establish some sense of case law. And of course, we have a case right now, and previously, who do you go to? A person wearing saffron, we're all adults here, we can talk about what actually happens, having a sexual relationship with an unmarried woman he was, quote, preaching to. She's under the impression he's going to marry her. He's under the impression he's fallen, but he's not stopping, right? He moves to another place, moves to another country, shows back up. He's like the guy in saffron, and her life's ruined. She's distraught. So that's a case where, it's beyond the local temple authority. And I think one thing that just emphasis on this, that I lived through an era in Krishna consciousness, and I'm embarrassed about it, where if there was some kind of sexual impropriety, I don't know where it came from. I think we're just too much of a male-dominant society in those days. It was just assumed it was the woman's fault. It was like heavy branding. Women were Maya Devis, and if some man had ended up in some relationship with a woman, she's a Maya Devi. And usually she was the one that was moved. And this is a complete reversal of that, in the sense that if whoever is the authority figure, they give the example, say like in a church environment or a temple environment, somebody, they're divorcee or their marriage has fallen apart, and they come to the pastor, the minister, the president for counseling, and they end up in some kind of sexual relationship. Even he may argue it's consensual. It's not, because of the power dynamic. And there's some states in the United States now, you can go to jail for that. Same thing, if you're like a psychologist and you end up with a relationship with one of your patients, you can go to jail. Or if you're a teacher, you can go to jail. So there's I think there's 7 or 8 states down the states. So those are the types of things that's pretty clear how to deal with it, because it's more severe. The more nuanced things, I think we're going to have to develop some case law and just some history. It's pretty new. We'll go back and look and see what's been done before. But some of those...
Understood. My next is a comment or a question which comes from how people form impressions, given that we are, quote unquote, a spiritual society. Therefore, any kind of moral, financial, sexual digression is considered very serious. So one reason that the GBC considered renaming the office from Leadership Misconduct to Leadership Conduct was that any case which comes to that office, whether there is merit in it or not, I'm very glad you used the word complainant and respondent. But often people outside, they quote that this person's file investigation is going on with the Leadership Misconduct Office, even when the person is not declared guilty. So, in order to take away that stigma from the office and the pressures on the office, there was this consideration to just keep it as Leadership Conduct Office, because that would include one, taking away the stigma, and the other, probably also create more educational content in it, which also preventatively guides leaders towards behaving better. So is that something that can be considered?
We had a long discussion on what the name should be, and we decided to go with misconduct, because we as I recall, we really wanted to make it clear that we're dealing with aberrations. It's not a leadership training department. It's not an educational department. We're going to educate people about what is misconduct, but it really steps in when there's allegations of leadership misuse, abuse, like that. And I think in part, just having this office and having, it helps to know there's people looking over my shoulder. Right? And sometimes they say a lock keeps honest people honest. So a Leadership Misconduct Office hopefully keeps leaders from misconducting, if that's the right term. That was our rationale. Yeah, okay. Okay, now the hard questions are coming. So
Just to say that unfortunately, maybe not in your countries, but in the US, every day if you look in newspapers, you could find unfortunately things like this, So for the general public, it's not a big thing anymore. It's just, unfortunately, Kali Yuga, and it happens, The Roman Catholics has for the moment such a big problem, all over the world as an example, But there are also other religious movements who are in the same case, So therefore, we don't feel in general, if we have this confidentiality and we take care of the process properly, that it's on a widespread topic to actually ban a devotee for life or make a big impact on a devotee for life. I think that's a topic, But it's unfortunate that we have to deal with these things, It's necessary, yes. It's the case, the same case Prabhupada said, why there is a prison, Normally we don't need a prison, okay? But as people don't follow the law, we need a prison house, and it's the same here, Why did Krishna create the material world? Because, we needed to do that. Yeah. Anuttama Prabhu adds, of course, it's not just religious movements. It's in the corporate world happening, it's in schools happening, all over the place. So it's Kali Yuga, of course, everywhere. Okay. Next question.
So Prabhuji, from the similar lines, I was also thinking the same. So sexual harassment policy is known as POSH, prevention of sexual harassment. They don't call it sexual harassment, so they try to make it positive and action oriented. I was just thinking prevention of Leadership Misconduct Office. Because even punishment is a prevention, because you're creating an example. So, but I mean, you've already spoken about it at length. Second point was, Prabhuji, it was mandatory for leaders to report. So that means if somebody doesn't report, is there a punishment for him?
Very good question. We just rolled this out intern in the RGB. We will have a leadership conference for 2 days, end of March. It's a big topic during this leadership conference, where we roll it out in general, okay? And we are requesting, of course, the office to help us, or help the local leaders with some educational information, so that we follow up what we just decided, But it's just came out of the ground, in the meaning, the little plant, and now we have to work on it to properly roll it out. Thank you.
That's possibly going to interact with your first question, which is mandatory when? What's the cutoff that it's mandatory to report? Yes. And that's why it wasn't emphasized a lot here, but a big part of this is deal with it on the local level. Uh-huh. We're not asking all these things come at the end. But this is partly to inform presidents and GBCs and zonal supervisors. You deal with it, as Jai Krishna said, occasionally it comes to the national office, but we hope most of these things, and most of these things are not going to be so severe, however we define that, that they're going to be dealt with on a local level.
Sure. Prabhuji, one last thing is, what is there are two parts. One is, what is the process to reinstate the honor of a devotee who's been falsely accused, because his image is tarnished, he's maligned, and it's in the office. He's also suspended because the severity was apparently very high, but it was found out it was a false allegation. So is there a process for that? And the last part is, how do you recover a fallen devotee? Suppose somebody has committed a crime and we know he's wrong. What do we do to bring him back to mainstream, if there is a chance at all?
Yeah. You can see we had this very good question. We had this, actually, maybe can go back to the slide about the org structure. We had devotee care there. That was specially meant that you see here we have a devotee care there. So that was also meant that we would help devotees in this case in trouble, And the other topic is, it said, inform the ones who may need to be informed, in addition to the leaders, In such a case, it's a big topic that somebody was really, what can I say, putting a bad name on them, We may have to inform the community, okay? It was false accusation, and it did not happen, and whatever, so that we can restore, actually, the name for the devotee, And the witnesses may go out and speak about it. We know. Prajalpa is unfortunately there in our movements too. So this may go out without even coming from the office or from the official process.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Prabhu. So we use the term leader. So I have a very basic question. So who is the leader that you are referring to? Like the misconduct of a leader, or even leaders who can, report, mandatory reporters. So who is a leader in this case? Just has to be an official leader, or even a Bhakti Riksha leader, somebody who leads home programs?
Yes, the leader we define is a very wide range of devotees who gain some trust by followers, okay? Somebody who is really a great kirtan leader, and he actually misuses his power. So that's part of it. He's a preacher, he's a kirtan leader, whatever. And then all the officials, temple president, department heads, and so on, But it's a very wide range of positions, So wherever this trust is there, where somebody has a sort of power over somebody, then we would recognize him or her as a leader.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. So that makes sense. And the second thing is confidentiality. Like, when somebody is a whistleblower, how do we protect the confidentiality of that person? Because I have had experiences where, leadership is like, we have to name that person, we can't keep confidentiality. So how important is that, and how do you?
It's very important. I can tell you the last meeting we had with our director, he said, I have just 2 cases, but we are the liaison committee, we do not know. We do not know where, from whom, what is the seriousness of the cases. So I think it's but it's quite easy to protect confidentiality within the process. I think the problem is more out there. The complainant goes around and talks to all his friends and family, whatever. They go and spread it even more. So I think that's more the big risk, that we actually brand somebody as a, what is the right English term? Yes, thank you for that. A person responsible for leadership misconduct, So I think that the risk is more in the community itself and in the environment of the complainant. Not in the process itself.
Thank you, Bro.
So we thank you very much for attending our presentation here. As said, it's a recent development. We voted on it on the RGB level. Now we are rolling it out. And of course, as usual, we will make some practical experiences. We said that every few years we would have to re-evaluate the procedures, the policies, so that we can adjust and improve them. And we are looking forward to have as few cases as possible, because we are a spiritual movement, and we all know that we are aiming for something much higher than misconduct, you know. And I think it's also important for the leaders to know all these little things, because it protects the leaders themselves, you know. Okay, don't stand too close to somebody. Don't do this. Don't, you know. So there are a number of don'ts for the leaders actually to prevent that an accusation is coming up, you know. So to differentiate between the serious cases and actually the other parts. Thank you.
One more thing to add, actually, in North America, at least in our temple, Houston, we actually had the director of NULSMO to come and do a seminar for the entire community to just on these points in terms of what is misconduct. And so people are at least create the awareness in the community so that people know, I mean, both the persons who may be committing or who may want to commit, they also are on, at least put on watch, as well as the people who are going through it, they know when to report, what to report, how to report, and so forth.
Thank you for saying that. You know, we had once a meeting in Houston, all the leaders, and we had a shooting or a shooter training. Huh? If somebody would come in, you know, as it happens, unfortunately. Yeah. Shooter, you know, it happens so many times in the United States that somebody just comes in, you know. So we had a wonderful training there, how as a leader and how we react and how we instruct our devotees, you know, in such a case. Thank you.
Do you know what to do? Any of you know what to do? 3 steps. Run. That's the first instruction. If you hear something, don't go, you know, boom, 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 you hear some gunfire. Run. Second thing, if you can't run, hide. That's the second step. If you can't hide, fight. Not fight, you know, it's like, get out of there, get away, be safe. That's the first thing. Run, hide, fight. Remember that one? And another thing they talk about, just real quick, is they specific to most of the, you know, it never happened in your other countries, but a lot of these people, they're very unbalanced, and they're not like big, tough, like Rambo guys. They're oftentimes little, you know, little wimpy guys that just have some real psychological balance, and they buy a gun. So a lot of times, you know, a couple people can stop them from making violence, but still run, hide, fight. So remember that. That's all I remember the whole presentation from the sheriff.
Thank you again. Hare Krishna. Thank you.